Hello, and welcome to Life Diaries, a space where the pages of life open up, one story at a time. These are tales written by experience, spoken from the heart. Take a moment for yourself, and let's begin. Every evening, turning towards home, Eleanor slowed her step. The children's home was tucked away after the last bend, and at these hours the children were usually noisy on the playground. Noticing passers-by, the little ones would run up to the fence, their eyes full of pleading. The bravest ones would stretch out their little hands and ask, "Auntie, are you my mummy?" The young woman's heart would clench with pain at every such question. She could have chosen a different road, avoided meeting those eyes, but the desire to become a mother was all-consuming. The bitter realization that she would never have a child of her own made this moment of encountering someone else's pain almost necessary. She couldn't refuse this poignant opportunity to hear, "Are you looking for me?" And this evening, as always, she slowed her step, casting a glance at the playground with a mixture of fear and strange hope. Most of the children were engrossed in their games, but a little boy in a bright red jacket stood alone by the fence. He looked up at the approaching woman and remained silent, but in his gaze there was so much unspoken pleading that Eleanor's heart trembled. As she walked past, the child's eyes followed her without wavering. She returned home completely distraught, and her husband immediately noticed her state. "Ellie, what happened? You're not yourself," Arthur asked anxiously. "Arthur, I need to talk to you seriously," she began hesitantly, choosing her words. "I want to tell you." Her husband smiled, noticing her agitation. "Ellie, you're stumbling, hesitating. What's wrong? Is it something so important it could turn our whole life upside down?" He saw how difficult these words were for her. "You know, Artie, that I can't have children," she finally managed, and the old pain echoed in her soul again. "Ellie, why open up an old wound? We've already talked about this. We've come to terms with our sorrow." Arthur tried to stop her. "Why keep coming back to it?" "Artie, please, listen to me completely. Don't interrupt," Eleanor pleaded. "Every day I walk past the children's home. Abandoned children live there, unwanted by anyone except kind hearts. Today I saw a boy there, just a tiny thing. He was just standing and looking at me." His gaze turned her whole soul upside down. "Artie, I want to adopt him. He will be our son." Arthur grunted hesitantly, considering what he had heard. "I've never thought about that," he admitted. "You say, unwanted children? But do normal parents abandon their children?" Doubt sounded in his voice. "Oh, Artie, I know what you mean," Eleanor sighed. "Of course it's terrible, but there are accidents, different circumstances. Not all these children are from troubled parents. Not all of them have bad heredity." She moved closer, her eyes full of tears. "But Artie, please, let's go together, just to look at this boy." They returned to this conversation all evening, and even at night, already in bed, they talked about the painful subject again. This thought gave them no peace. The next day, Arthur met his wife after work, and they walked the familiar road together. Eleanor walked with a pounding heart, full of anxious thoughts. What if her husband didn't like the boy? What if someone had already taken him, and they were too late? Or they simply wouldn't be able to recognize him among the other children who were also waiting for a family. But the boy was standing in the same place as yesterday, as if he was waiting for them. The man and woman approached the fence, trying to talk to him, but he remained silent. Only his large gray-blue eyes looked plaintive and pleading. Then the couple decided to go into the children's home and talk to the director. Margaret, an elderly woman with kind eyes, told them the boy's sad story. His mummy and daddy were gone. They had died in a terrible accident. Until recently, he had lived with his grandmother, but a few days ago she also passed away. Her heart couldn't bear the loss of her daughter. The little boy had no relatives left. The boy's name was Michael. He was smart, healthy, and handsome, but he greatly missed his loved ones. He didn't know the terrible truth yet and was still waiting for his mummy and daddy to return. And yesterday he came back from his walk and told me, Margaret added, her voice trembling. I saw an auntie. That's probably my mummy. She's looking for me and can't find me. I'll always stand there and wait. That auntie, who is my mummy, will definitely come and find me. At these words, Eleanor couldn't hold back and burst into tears, the tears streaming down her face. Her husband awkwardly hugged her, trying to comfort her, but tears also glistened in his eyes. Leaving the director, they knew for sure that they would return. They would return for Mikey. Soon their life completely changed, filled with new meaning. A son appeared in their family, their beloved Michael, the smartest, the most capable, the most desired boy in the world. Years flew by unnoticed, like a whirlwind. Days and weeks merged into a rapid flow. The parents didn't even notice how their Michael grew up, finished school and university, went into business, and became a successful man. Now they didn't have to count every penny, as they did before, when they lived on the modest salaries of a nurse and a plumber. Back then, they couldn't afford much, but they always found the means for Michael. They tried to feed him better, dress him no worse than others, and send him on summer holidays, while having to strictly economize themselves. Now their grown-up son, as if in gratitude for everything, strove to give his parents the best. Thanks to him, they went abroad for the first time, moved into a new, spacious apartment, bought a large country house, and a new car. And then one fine day, Mikey brought home a fiancée, a modest, sweet girl named Annie. His parents liked her immediately. Soon, without unnecessary fanfare, they had a wedding, and the young couple went on their honeymoon. The satisfied parents eagerly awaited grandchildren, their dreams of the future filled with new images. In the evenings, they loved to discuss whether their beloved Mikey would have a boy or a girl. Eleanor imagined herself walking with a stroller, mentally baked pies for her beloved grandchildren, and planned fun games at the country house. Sometimes she and her husband argued about the number of children and their sex. Of course, the grandmother dreamed of the first granddaughter, a beauty with big bows in her light hair, while the grandfather was sure that the first would definitely be a grandson, with whom he could go fishing and tinker in the garage. But the newlyweds returned, and Annie's slender figure remained unchanged. The parents timidly hinted to their son and daughter-in-law that it was time to have a baby, but the young couple just kept quiet. Several years passed like this, and the long-awaited grandchildren still did not appear. One day, Eleanor couldn't bear it any longer and asked her son directly, Mikey, when are you going to make us happy with grandchildren? We're so eager to cuddle them. She saw them delaying and didn't understand why. After all, you're doing great financially. Annie works too. Are you putting it off because of your careers? Her son blinked in confusion, his face becoming embarrassed. Mum, Annie has been given a discouraging diagnosis, he said quietly. She will never be able to become a mother. We've already come to terms with it. Perhaps it was meant to be. Pain sounded in his voice. But I love Annie. I will never leave her. Let's not talk about this anymore. It's hard enough for us. The elderly woman's heart ached. The old wound reopened with pain. Could history be repeating itself? And her son also face the impossibility of having children? A few days later, Eleanor walked the familiar road again, a road she hadn't walked for many years. And again, before the turn to the children's home, her heart ached intensely. She took the last step and stopped, peering at the familiar scene. The children were playing on the playground as before. Some, like many years ago, ran up to the fence. Their eyes, full of hope and anxiety, were fixed on the women passing by. And again, just like then, tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes. She so wanted to hug and pity each of these unfortunate, fate-deprived children. A few days later, she came here with her daughter-in-law. Both women, the elderly one and the young one, stood by the fence for a long time, silently watching the playing children. Suddenly, a little girl in a bright blue jacket came up to the fence and looked at them carefully. And then, as if recognizing them, she asked, "Auntie, did you come for me?" At these words, Annie couldn't hold back and burst into tears, unable to calm down for a long time. Her mother-in-law whispered something quietly in her ear, comforting and supporting her. Then they both hugged and laughed through their tears, as if they had understood something very important. A week later, Annie and Eleanor came to the same children's home, which had become so dear to them, but this time with Michael. When they spoke to the director about the little girl, Margaret, to their surprise, said she couldn't give her away. "What? Why?" Eleanor gasped, not understanding the refusal. "We've already fallen in love with her, and she seems to have recognized us too. We're ready to start the adoption process. She's so dear to our hearts." "The thing is," Margaret began with a sigh, "that Marina has a twin sister. Her name is Maria." She explained that Maria hadn't been out today because she was a little unwell. Both girls had come to them from the reception center. Their story was ordinary and tragic at the same time. "There was a good, stable family," the director continued. "The father worked in the police. The mother was an accountant. She went on maternity leave after the twins were born. A misfortune happened to the girl's father at work. He died. The woman couldn't cope with her grief, started drinking, completely neglected the children, just forgot about them. If it hadn't been for kind-hearted neighbors, something bad could have happened to the girls. The neighbors pitied the unfortunate woman who had lost her husband for a long time, but then they couldn't bear it and wrote a statement to the guardianship authorities. Guardianship representatives came and took the children." Margaret finished the story. "You should have seen the state they were in. Thin, dirty, frightened little savages. And the mother, upon learning that the children were taken, simply left and got married. That's such a terrible story." "Poor girls," Eleanor sighed, shaken by what she had heard. "Such tiny things, and they've already been through so much." The director added that the girls were healthy, without abnormalities, and they had no more relatives. "Have you changed your minds?" she asked cautiously. "Can we meet both girls?" Annie asked timidly, her voice trembling with emotion. "You know, I always stand guard over the children's interests," Margaret replied. "Most of all, I'm afraid of hurting their little souls. They'll see your interest, start waiting, hoping, and they're so small, so wronged by fate." She looked at them with concern. "And what if you change your minds later, or realize you're not ready for such a serious step? That would be a terrible blow for the girls." Michael's voice sounded a little muffled, as if he was holding back strong emotions. "We won't change our minds," he said firmly. "We will definitely take both girls. We are very determined." He looked the director directly in the eyes. "I don't think guardianship will have any reason to refuse us." Days began, filled with hustle and bustle, but these were such pleasant chores. And Annie and Michael and Eleanor and even Arthur found time to drop by the children's home. They hurried to see their future daughters and granddaughters, Marina and Maria. And finally, the long-awaited day arrived. Eleanor set the festive table, baked her favorite pies, her heart fluttering with excitement in anticipation of the children. When the doorbell rang and the door opened, she clutched her heart and cried with happiness. All four stood on the threshold, beaming with joy. Michael with Annie and their newly found daughters. A new life began, full of cares and small problems, but also immense happiness. The young couple lived separately, but the grandmother and grandfather often visited their beloved granddaughters, helped, and played with them. And then one day, Michael called his mother and said that on Sunday, he and Annie were inviting their parents over. He added in a mysterious voice that a big surprise awaited them. "I wonder what they're up to," Arthur mused, running through possible reasons in his mind. "There haven't been any holidays planned, it seems." "Let's go and see," Eleanor smiled affectionately, anticipating the visit. "They've been so busy lately with Annie, I don't know what with really, but I've been constantly looking after the granddaughters." She added proudly, "They've grown so big, so independent. Annie really is a wonderful mother, reasonably strict and very loving." And so Sunday arrived. When the parents entered their son's apartment, they gasped in surprise, freezing on the threshold. A large stroller stood in the middle of the room, and in it lay two plump, rosy-cheeked babies. "What is this? How is this?" was all the astonished Eleanor could utter, not believing her eyes. "Annie and I decided that besides daughters, we also want sons," Michael began with a smile. "But we didn't get two sons." He walked over to the stroller, beaming with happiness. "Here, Grandma and Grandpa, meet Henry and Katie. They're already 5 months old." "These are our babies," Annie added, looking tenderly at the little ones. "I decided to quit my job and devote myself entirely to the children. But I can't do without your help, Mum." She looked at her mother-in-law with gratitude. "And yours too, of course, Dad." "Oh, how happy I am," was all the proud grandmother of 4 grandchildren could manage, her eyes filling with tears of joy. "How rich I am! I have 3 granddaughters and 1 grandson." Her heart was overflowing with tenderness. "But I don't think we'll stop here." Michael put his arm around his wife's shoulders. Their eyes met, full of love and understanding. "Of course, darling," Annie replied softly, leaning against him. "After all, children are such immense, incomparable happiness."